You may remember last week, and it was a pretty big story here in Montreal and in Quebec, the release of the Michelin Guide, first time ever for the province or the city. And I guess what I can say, and having discussed this last week with a couple of people, there's a bit of head scratching going on. But I thought the most interesting part of this story, we can get to that in a minute, was the one that appeared in the Gazette about a man, his name is Chris Watson, who in his 20s actually landed a job as one of the Michelin Guide judges, inspectors, however we'd like to frame it. How did you come upon this job? Was this something you'd always wanted to do? Because that would seem rather early in life to try to get a job as a Michelin Guide inspector. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody, I think nowadays, obviously with social media and global exposure of the Michelin Guide, maybe people do kind of have a yearning to have the job. But in my day, it wasn't an aim. The Michelin Guide was, well known in Europe, less global coverage. I'd actually studied hotel management at university, done a stint in the kitchen in London at the Savoy, and I wanted to be a GM of a hotel. I graduated, went overseas, took a few roles in the UK, in hotels, working my way up the ladder. And I saw an ad for an inspector. Still today, Michelin being a very conservative organization, they still advertise the roles on a fairly regular basis, largely because it's a rigorous role and one which, whilst on one hand you can say it's the job of a lifetime, on the other, it very quickly becomes a job.
So I'll get to that in this. Yeah, I'll get to that. I want to go back to you having applied. So they actually had placed an ad that you answered. Now, eventually, from what I understand, you didn't get the job initially, but ultimately someone left and you got the job. Is that right?
That's right. I applied, was interviewed, went through a very lengthy process, meeting a number of individuals. Probably one of the lengthiest interview processes I've ever been through. And I was informed that I wasn't successful the first time round. And then around 9 months later, I was reapproached by them, and they said, look, if you'd still be interested, we would like to offer you a job. So I had the unique opportunity of working with a team of inspectors, obviously, one of whom had picked me 6 months to a year earlier, which was an interesting dynamic. And I spent almost 5 years with the Guide.
I want to go back to something that I read in the piece, and I kind of, again, wondered. You wrote training took about 9 months to my question, which would be, training for what exactly? What are you training for?
I think Michelin's success globally is that they do their utmost to ensure that a star in London is the same as a star in Paris, is the same as a star in New York, or indeed Quebec. But they're looking for consistency. They're not looking for individuality. They don't want inspectors to think outside the box. They want everyone thinking the same. And maybe that's why the Guide has ended up being so highly revered. It's a considerable investment. I toured the UK and overseas, training with other inspectors, training to learn the process, training to learn what 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars really means.
So I would ask as well, because I think most people would think it's a pretty glamorous life being a Michelin Guide inspector, but in fact, you're right, it's not. You describe it as lonely. You talk about just how much work was involved, and I believe you said you had lunch and dinner out 5 days a week, every week?
It's definitely 3 weeks of the month, you're eating lunch and dinner 5 days a week. And then your 4th week, you're back in the office planning your next trip. And eating around London, which is, like most capital cities across the globe, requires an awful lot of eating. So, yeah, it's often lunch and dinner every day, Monday to Friday, for a month.
Most
And that
people.
takes a toll.
Yeah, I was going to say most people would hear that and think that'd be wonderful. You just said it takes a toll. How does that take a toll?
I mean, it very quickly becomes a job. You lose perhaps the passion that you have for dining out, the excitement that we all share when you're going out with your loved one, exploring new restaurants. It lacks that sheen after a certain amount of time. And obviously, eating in the top restaurants is not something you do every day. A lot of your eating is done alone. Certainly the 3 weeks that you travel, you will very rarely meet another inspector, only on the occasion of a 1-star or 2-star candidate. So you're eating lunch and dinner alone. And that, by its very nature, takes the pleasure away from dining. Of course, initially you're super excited, and certainly the 9 months you spend with other inspectors, which is, it has its own challenges. The profile of inspectors is very different. It can be, of course, you're training with more senior inspectors, so largely speaking, they're going to be older than you. They may have other interests. It's not all a group of foodies. People come from wide cross-section backgrounds, varying. The only thing you really have in common is you're all the nationality of that particular guide, invariably. And secondly, you're all employed as inspectors with the same ultimate goal. And living with different inspector every week for a period of 9 months, especially on some trips when you're traveling far from home base, you will spend the weekend away. It does create tensions in a small car environment.
People wonder, to get in the Michelin Guide, whether it's to get a star, whether it's to get an honorable mention, as it were. What exactly are you looking for? What were you trained to look for?
I mean, the guide's purpose is to highlight, to potential visitors to that particular area or city, the best places to eat. That's how the guide evolved in the first place, providing people who were driving across countries the best diners, the best restaurants along that route. You're really looking for consistency. You're looking for quality product, quality ingredients. You're looking for a certain level of culinary technique, a certain level of skill, and probably one of the most critical factors is you're looking for a little bit of the chef on the plate, a little bit of that personality, a little twist to a dish, the heart and soul of the restaurant. And if you're ticking the boxes for those four elements, that's a restaurant that you would want to put in the guide. When you talk about 1-star, when you talk about recommended restaurants, that's really what you're looking for. When you start going up the ladder, 1-star, 2-star, and ultimately 3 stars, you're looking for a deeper level of complexity and sophistication in all those areas. And Michelin has had to adjust to that over the years. And even in my time, many years ago, you're also looking for that to push the boundaries a little bit and recognize restaurants that are showing some level of individuality. So it may not fit the norm. In my day, it was the grand palaces, whereas nowadays there's a multitude of the neighborhood restaurants and your family favourites that are doing an equally good job and should be recognised for that.
I would ask as well, and I know you mentioned this in the article that I read. People wonder if service has anything to do with it. Does it count? As long as the food is at that level to get a star, for example. Did service come into play, or does it come into play?
I think Michelin publicly say that service has less of an impact, but of course, service does have an impact. It must match the level of the restaurant. Even one, although very few people talk about it, value for money is such a subjective criteria, but your value for money must match that service and must match that cuisine level. And if it doesn't, then of course the restaurant's not going to get recognized. But at the same time, when you look up to the top of the tree accolades, of course, value for money becomes less of a factor.
I would ask as well, I started by talking about Quebec and the fact that we are now, in the Michelin Guide. The only 2-star restaurant in the entire province is in Quebec City, which is a smaller city, of course, than Montreal. A lot of people scratching their heads wondering why Montreal perhaps did not get more accolades. We have 3 restaurants here that each got a star. And then I read, though, at the beginning, because this is the first time this is happening in Quebec, this is the kind of thing one might expect. But the longer this goes, and year to year to year, more restaurants that some people think perhaps should have made it are likely to make it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, Michelin is, as I said before, they're very conservative. They will always err on the side of caution. People say that they're the last to award the ultimate accolades, and they're equally quite slow to take away, recognizing the impact of removing a star from a restaurant. So yeah, I think whilst Michelin is a bit like the royal family, they never explain their reasoning. I think that the 2 Michelin star restaurant is having not visited but just read about it. It's obviously offering something very unique and a very unique experience. And I think Michelin has tried to do that over the years as dining has moved from just an event to a more immersive experience. I think they've tried to recognize those.
Can you tell or give our listeners an idea of how, so in a city like Montreal, and we have a lot of wonderful restaurants here, a couple of the ones here that, you thought, or people who eat out regularly thought might have been mentioned, didn't get mentioned. How do the Michelin inspectors who come here find the restaurants that are here? Are they told where to go? How do they know which ones to visit?
Yeah, I mean, in my day, and I don't see it having changed much, the key to a successful guide, and a successful can mean many different things, is preparation. They will have researched, they will have looked at, I'm not sure if I'd say competitors, but certainly they'd have trawled the press. They'll have looked at other food guides, and they will ensure that they visit everyone that potentially could be an inclusion. But first time round, they will always err on the side of caution. And if a restaurant is almost there, they may decide not to give it. I would probably predict that next year's guide will show a little bit more depth.
With respect to the Michelin star, a star, 2-star, 3, what does that mean to a restaurant typically?
Many people have quoted a Robuchon comment many years ago, where he said, I think 20% increase for 1 star, 30-40% for 2-star, and then 100% for 3 stars. I'm not sure I share that view. I think it depends on the location and the market and many other factors. but there's no doubt that 1 star will put a restaurant on the map. And there's an immediate bump. When a restaurant gets 1 star, they will find their booking lines are ringing.
Have any restaurateurs ever called to complain about not having gotten the star?
No, I think restaurants have tried to maintain a good relationship with the guide, and they recognise that they're doing their best and they're super professional and out there in the market. They are the leading publication. I mean, many chefs that I bump into over the years have said to me, "Oh, I don't really want a star," but truthfully, 90% and above would love to have a star.